me at any of the NBFC summits, and that too with the technical touch to it. I think the organizers were smart enough to place me after the MIBAP or the regulator spoke and the younger brother spoke, then put me in place to take charge. It gives me a better opportunity, I think. So let me begin, since the broad topic for today is opportunity in a storm. In nutshell, having worked 27 years now in the NBFC sector, I think I will not be failing if I say that NBFCs are truly the Ironman of the financial services sector, the law profession. Because the turmoils, so-called turmoils, because I always feel, I'm a very optimist man, I always feel there is always opportunity in crisis. But the kind of crisis or turmoils that we have seen are perhaps unparalleled if you see the Indian scenario. And though the sector dates back more than 80 years, maybe even longer, because the concept of gold loans is far old, and perhaps, because what I can straight away tell you is that I know a lot of family-run NBFCs where this is the third generation getting into the business. So it's that old in the country. But prior to 1997, since there was no regulation, everything was voluntary, that is something of an era which is not really talked about, although a lot of good things did happen. And 1997 was the watershed year, because that is when some scams happened. Obviously, when you leave a sector unregulated, there are bound to be players who will try to, misuse and misbehave. At the same time, there were certain players with all the good intentions could not develop a sound business model. And I think that is where what Dr. Rajan clearly mentioned, the absolute necessity of regulation comes in place. Because let us understand that regulation and development always have to go hand in hand. One cannot do without the other. No development can happen without regulation, and no regulation can be effective if it does not develop the sector. Classic examples, if you look at some of the new age regulators today, the development word is enshrined in the name itself. So you have the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority, the Provident Fund Regulatory and Development Authority. So the development word is enshrined in the name itself, because as I said, you cannot have one without the other. So if you look back, as I said, while the sector may be very old, but there are certain landmarks, I will call them, you may call them milestones, you may call them the downturn years, where the real so-called turmoil happened. First, of course, the foremost, as I said, was 1997, when some scams happened, intentionally or unintentionally, because the sector was practically unregulated. A lot of people thought it as an easy route to access public money and do whatever with it. Then, obviously, the regulator came down heavily. Although I still remember the words of the then Finance Minister, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, he very rightly said that let us not throw the baby with the bathwater. And that is what Dr. Rajan also talked about, that let us not punish the good ones in the garb of trying to regulate the bad ones. And that was an era when the RBI Act was amended and Chapter 3B, which talked about the regulation of the non-banking financial institutions, came in. And the entire gamut of regulatory process was kicked in. And RBI as the regulator came into the picture. It's been 22 years now. And if you ask me, I think the regulator has been more active as compared to the sector itself. Because the kind of regulatory framework and the way in which has evolved is, if you ask me, at the whole, a very laudable step. Because yes, as a sector sitting this side of the table, I will always find ways to criticize and try to find that there are challenges which are there. I mean, that is there, but let us not forget the broader objective, which the so-called regulatory framework has been able to achieve. So what this system has done is that today, this sector stands tall and really tall. He did give you some statistics. I think he was very humble enough. Let me give you some statistics. which come out from RBI itself. As on 30th September 2018, the total balance sheet size of the sector stood at 26 lakh crores, which puts it at number 3 in the system. The average growth rate for the last 2 to 3 years has been 15% at least. Profitability has been going up by 20 to 30%. The NPL levels still stand at around 5% when you see the banking sector grappling with double-digit NPA figures. And the return on equity, the return on assets have been quite strong. So the sector stands really tall. So much so that it has drawn the attention of world bodies. When I say world bodies, the likes of IMF have spoken very high about the sector and the role which has been playing. And FIDC as the sector representative and a voluntary SRO for the sector, we were approached by World Bank and we've signed 2 MOUs with World Bank, wherein World Bank is conducting some training programs for member companies on commercial credit reporting, movable asset-backed lending, and movable meaning the intangible assets, wherein I'll touch upon later, the technology kicks in. And as recent as yesterday, I was in Mumbai, and another meeting with the World Bank officials where they are very, very keen to not only renew that partnership, but take it a step forward and also start, bring in the concepts and the provisions of the insolvency bankruptcy code. Also take up this opportunity and use FIDC's platform to leverage on marketing the leasing in India, which unfortunately has suffered. So World Bank wants us to take up that role. So what I'm trying to say is, as I said, the sector has grown itself. It's a true example. And here I'm reminded of a very famous story which I heard during childhood, that once a disciple of Guru Nanak Dev went up and asked him, Guruji, what is the value of my life? And Guru Nanak gave him a piece of stone and said, go and fetch its value in the market, but just remember one thing, don't sell it. So this man went up to a vegetable seller and showed him that stone. He said, okay, I'll give you a pack of onions for this. He said, but I can't sell it. He went to a storekeeper. He said, okay, I'll give you 1 crore worth of goods. You give me this stone. He said, sorry. He said, 2 crores. He said, sorry. Finally, he went to a jeweler. Jeweler offered him few crores of rupees. He refused. Finally, he went to a gemstone specialist. The moment he gave that stone to that gemstone specialist, that gentleman was awestruck. He put a red cloth on the ground. He put that stone on the ground and then started encircling it. He said, from where on earth did you get it? Even if I give my entire life, give my entire belongings, whatever you ask for, still I cannot give you the right price for this. So he was confused. He came back, took that stone and came back to Guru Nanak Dev and said, this is what I heard. And there and then Guruji gave him the idea. The value lies in the person who evaluates it, not the way you perceive it. You may be doing something which may be priceless for you, which may be totally irrelevant for you, but the way the others perceive is of importance. And I think NBFC sector has truly stood that. Today, times are that the world has taken up and started taking notice and appreciate the efforts being done by the sector. Taking this step further, I think very rightly, I'm very happy that a senior official and a man of such intelligence and know-how like Dr. Rajan mentioned about shadow banking, because that is something very, very close to my heart. And my friend Mr. Satish talked about, the fact we are already being termed as a negative connotation as non-players, non-something is a very negative connotation. Although there is a history to it, because RBI said that in the 1997 scam era, a lot of so-called finance companies projected themselves as banks and, took away public money. So they thought of really coining a term non-bank finance company, and that is where it has been put in the RBI Act. Although the work is in progress, we may see a change there. But the real adding fuel to the fire came from around 2006, when suddenly this concept of shadow banking really started being talked about more in India. And people started addressing NBFCs as shadow banks. And obviously the reasons were simple, as I said, that shadow banks is what? That you are a shadow of a bank. So that means you may be doing something like banking without being a bank. So you are in the shadow of a bank. But you all know shadow banking, the term shadow looks shady. It looks as if you are doing something shady. And we are not. The real difference between so-called shadow banks of China or the shadow banks of the US or the Western world lies, as he rightly said, in the entire regulation. No shadow bank across the world is regulated the way NBFCs are. And herein, friends, I take this opportunity to inform the House that in our last meeting, 9th January 2019, convened by the RBI Governor, new Governor, Mr. Shaktikanta Das, he categorically informed that as a policy, RBI has taken a decision to shell and drop this term of shadow banks from the words being coined by RBI. So let us clearly understand that shadow bank is a term no longer valid for NBFCs in India. So you can go out, I know press will not stop, at least I do so. Every time you hear this word, you can counter them and say that the regulator has dropped this term. There is no business for you to call us as a shadow bank. That is history now. And we welcome that decision which RBI has taken. Looking back at the history, when we say specialists and how, the opportunities, the sector has also evolved in a way that some of the, the way structurally it is placed, you have this very sometimes terrifying looking figure of 10,000 odd NBFCs. But if you look at it and try to dissect how it is placed, 90% of the companies are small and medium. Right? And hardly 10%, even 5% would be what we call as big companies or RBI terms, and that's systemically important. In fact, the number is only about 276. But the interesting part is the 90% will manage only 10% of the total assets under management, and the 10% of the bigger company control more than 90% of the assets under management. And some of the bigger players over the years have become specialists. So we live in an era of specialists. I remember when I was a child, we had one family doctor who was a neurologist, who was a cardiologist, who was an ENT, who was everything. But today, when my son sneezes, I will take him to an ENT and not to a general physician. We live in an era of specialists. And today, if anybody is looking for a truck loan, you will go to a Sundaram or a Shriram. You want a tractor loan, you will go to the Mahindras. You want an equipment loan, you will go to a Shrey. You want a gold loan, you will go to Muthoot and the Manapurams. So NBFCs have developed and become specialists in their own product lines. And that is where they have been able to withstand the turmoil. Some economists and some people argue that this by itself is a risk. I don't feel so. Agreed, the sectors may. We have seen times when the automobile sector has seen the turmoils of the time, but have you seen these NBFCs go down? Not at all. Because in India there is a very huge and a vibrant used asset market, which itself, and that is where it brings me to the 2008 crisis, because I remember during that time the government was in a hyperactive mode. Literally, that was an era which I still quote because I was on touch with Ministry of Finance over mobile phone on a daily basis. To the extent that a joint meeting was convened with the bankers, and bankers were sitting with blank checks. How much of a bailout do you need? And you will be surprised to know that it is there in the ministry records that FIDC went up to the ministry and said, we don't want a bailout. We don't want a bailout. What we want is a permanent refinancing mechanism. And that in itself speaks the strength and the true strength of the sector. Of course, then we also saw the turmoil so-called in 2014, because then that is when post-Usha Thorat committee report, RBI came up with a revised regulatory framework for NBFCs. The entire regulatory structure was put in two buckets. You had one side the non-deposit taking below 500 crore companies, and the other side was all deposit taking and systemically important. So this side was put under a very, very stringent regulatory rule, which has been almost at par with the banks. While the other side, being non-deposit taking and being small, is subject to a lax regulation, and this continues even today. That is how it has been placed. And then, of course, 2018, the ILFS story happened, which we all know. Now, as I said, there is always an opportunity in crisis. So what happened post, I will not go much in history, the recent crisis that we talk about. I remember, obviously, because press likes to create sensations, so a lot of people called and people wanted me to react, how it is happening. I said, well, to me it is a typical stock market phenomenon, nothing else. Because to say that the likes of ILFS represent the NBFC sector is absolute rubbish. And it is not me saying, it is the statistics which speaks. Because the likes of ILFS, that means the companies who are into that kind of lending are only 7 or 8 out of 10,000. The so-called long-term infra financing players. And out of these 7 or 8, 5 are public sector companies. So how can you say that ILFS represents the NBFC sector? And as you very rightly said, there can be an issue with the company. Right or wrong, intentional or unintentional is a different story. But to say that there was an asset liability mismatch in the entire book NBFC sector was itself a myth which has been very, itself that myth is bust. Have you seen any further defaults? Because people started questioning the solvency. Till 30th September, NBFC was the darling of the financial services. A bright spot. Everybody wanted to invest in NBFCs. Suddenly overnight, things changed. People said, boss, aapki solvency mein question mark hai. And that is why, I mean, nothing wrong. That is where the world functions, and that is where typically media in our country functions. Because overnight you could be coined a chore, and overnight you could be made a king. And that is where it happened. But the real issue lies that there was no inherent mismatch in the balance sheets. That may be true in long-term players like the housing finance companies or the infra financing companies. But the typical NBFC model is a short-term, small-ticket size lending. Whatever so-called mismatch happened by way of commercial paper borrowing was more of a market-driven phenomenon. Obviously, if things are going very well, everything is going well, I am making money, making profits, I have an opportunity to borrow money at a cheaper rate, I will try to play with that. I did not use 100 rupees of the bank which offered me, I used 70 rupees and borrowed the rest 30 from the commercial paper market. And with the understanding that yes, it will be rolled over because my financials are strong. It was the aftermath which did the damage. Suddenly the banks started behaving funny. And this is an issue which continues. Although things have changed a lot, banks did come up and offer liquidity by way of portfolio buyouts. But still the situation continues to be tough. However, going forward, soon we are already on the reversal path, and I am pretty confident by the beginning of the next quarter we should be back to the pre-ILFS space, and the growth story will continue. I think, sir, one point which you have really touched upon is, I think, the dream for the sector, that is the national policy on NBFCs. I remember way back in 2003, I made a similar presentation before the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance when it was deliberating on a financial companies regulation bill which never saw the light of the day. And similar point on a national policy on NBFCs on leasing needs to be made. It needs to be had because, more importantly, let us not have knee-jerk reactions. Let us have a long-term vision for the sector, both from what the sector perceives it, what the regulator perceives it, and more importantly, how does the government of India perceives it going forward. One more opportunity which the recent crisis provided us was that for the first time in the history of the sector, exclusive NBFC delegation had a half-an-hour meeting with the Honorable Prime Minister. And fortunately, I was part of that delegation. 7 of us spent 30 minutes with the Honorable Prime Minister. Never it had happened in the history. And I still remember, because of heavy security, all our phones, etc., were taken away by the security. And the moment the meeting finished, I took back my phone. There was a flood of calls from media because one lady called me and said, "Sir, just the news of this meeting has sent the stock market crazy. It's going up like anything, all NBFC stocks. Just the news that you guys are meeting the PM. So that is, I think, was a big, tremendous opportunity. What it did was, following that, the new RBI governor convened a meeting. And then we had a plethora of meetings which is continuing even today. Yes, I returned from Mumbai yesterday late evening after spending 2 days of hectic meetings. Every institution, government, non-government, bank, everybody wants to talk to us. And we at FIDC have also taken a call that this coming year, we are targeting in a mission mode to develop relations with the lenders, that means the banks. And this process has opened the door for one of the long-standing demands of the sector, that is to have a platform for structured dialogue with the regulator and with the ministry on a regular basis. We all know RBI governor meets the banking sector regularly, Ministry of Finance meets the banking sector regularly, why not NBFCs? And I am happy to share that the Honorable Governor, at least in the meeting, clearly accepted our demand and he said this is something we can do it immediately. So we are going to see a scenario, already process has started, but at the department level, already FIDC engages with the Department of Non-Banking Regulation once every quarter, we meet them and all policy matters are being discussed. So there is always an opportunity in crisis. Finally, since we are talking about technology, I would be failing in my duty if I don't talk about technology in the NBFC sector. Friends, I am happy to share that as the big innovators of the financial sector and as one of the best adapters of the changing world, NBFCs have enabled and adapted the latest advancements in technology very, very well. All this talk about blockchain and artificial intelligence has been very well incorporated. We know the concepts of alternate credit scoring models which are being developed, and that is something we are working with World Bank on. To based on your social media posts, your utility bill payments, etc., your credit scores are built. So even MSME sector or the unbanked segment which do not have a credit history henceforth can be made credit worthy. We are also talking about lending against the security of intangible assets like your receivables or the IPR. And of course, based on technology, we now have what I call the new kids on the block or the new face of the NBFC sector. The P2P lenders or all this generation of fintechs, online lenders, P2P lenders, and another category of which RBI has created is NBFC aggregators. All these are NBFC new kids on the block, as I call them, but very energetic, very dynamic, because this generation loves to play with technology. And some mind-boggling work is being done. Although, let me add a word of caution, because as things have happened, and that is where we've experienced in the past, the regulator is still in a mode of evolving. It took 2 years for RBI to come up with a basic regulatory structure for the P2P lenders. So my advice and key caution to these players would be that please tread with caution. I would suggest that before anybody dumps anything on you, why don't you guys get together and draft a piece of regulatory framework for yourself and suggest it. I offer all assistance from FIDC to ensure that a healthy regulatory framework is put in place to ensure that you guys become the new face of the sector and play an important role of the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of a new India. Thank you.